Yahim, we're here to discuss, Yahim, the Divine Comedy, or the comedy rather, by Dante. We have an article that was published a few years back on Dante's Statius. Statius was the Roman poet, we know, and Dante is believed to have presented Statius as a secret convert to Christianity and to have exposed Statius as a Christian, a secret Christian. In the article that I published a few years back, I'm showing that the message is not precisely that, but that in fact, Dante is saying that Statius was Christianized throughout the Middle Ages, and now Dante is exposing the real Statius. And Statius is simply representing, in a more general way, poetry as understood in the Virgilian, Platonic, political, classical political sense. Okay? So it is an alternative, you could say, to an apolitical philosophy. Okay? But Christianity was the alternative to apolitical philosophy, as you should know. It was supposed to have completed, according to some, philosophy, to be the consummation of philosophy. Dante is saying, well, no. Christianity is the consummation of an aspect of poetry, but it's a consummation that points back to something hidden. At any rate, we'll get to that. Maybe we'll explore this point further, but for now, I think it's worthwhile pointing out that Dante is suggesting that he is lifting up the lid that has kept Statius Christianized. In other words, that has taught us Roman poetry in a Christian context, taking that Christian context for granted. So he's lifting up that lid and exposing the original sense of poetry. He's helping us read Roman poetry as it was originally meant to be read. Okay? It has been submerged. And the same story about submerging comes up in the canto of Ulysses, because Ulysses in Inferno will be submerged by the waters, and that will essentially bury him. And now the possibility arises for Dante to expose him, to redeem him. How is this done? And this is the great challenge. But so much for Statius converting to Christianity. Obviously, we all know that there's no record about, and there's no sign about suggesting that Statius, the poet, ever converted to Christianity. We have no reason to. Nobody has ever mentioned this. Only Dante. In fact, not even Dante. This is what I said. Not even Dante. This is a complete misunderstanding of Dante. He is playing with this. He is sort of leading superficial readers to believe whatever they want to believe, but he is in fact saying virtually the opposite. Okay. Now, if you have other questions, we'll go through these. So this session of ours, this conversation, is going to try to clarify passages from the article And of course, the goal is to better understand Dante.
Yes, I could state parenthetically with reference to Odysseus that when he's submerged, this is happening in Inferno, where he is not so much being converted as damned. Um, in that setting, that is, we'll not take that for granted, of course. But as for the other things, I'll do my best to go over it and stay out of the fine grit at least until the end. Maybe we can go back. I'll introduce with my first question, opening with Canto 21 of Purgatorio. If you don't mind, I'll read from the translation that I was using, which is the Longfellow one. That's all right. I could try the Italian as well.
Well, give me the verses and I'll check.
Yes. We'll start with first one. The natural thirst that never is satisfied, accepting.
No, excuse me. Where is this? Is this the first verse of Canto
Yes.
21 of
21.
Purgatory? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay. The natural thirst that never is satisfied, accepting with the water for whose grace the woman of Samaria besought. Put me in travail, and haste goaded me along the.
No, it's too fast. Too
Okay.
fast. We'll never understand anything in Dante when we read so fast.
Okay.
To begin with, there's no woman. It's here, Dante called, of course, but we say woman. But Dante says femminetta.
What is a woman anyway?
Yeah, what is a woman? He says femminetta, like a little female. Okay?
Yeah,
literally, a little female. Domandò la grazia. Asked for grace. Okay? What does the guy say there? Ask for grace? The translator.
No, whose grace the woman of Samaria besought, accepting with the water for whose grace the woman of Samaria besought.
Right. The other thing is, let us pause on the first verse. The thirst, the natural thirst, right?
That's the question. That's what my first question.
Never satisfies.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
What is that? That's my first question.
Yeah?
Natural thirst. You identify it as justice in the essay, and that's the first.
If not with water, so it does satisfy with water. Onde la fede domandò la grazia, mi travagliava e pungeami la fretta per l'impacciata via. Okay, here we have again the way, which is there is an obstacle on the way, yeah? Dietro al mio duca. So we remember that this question of the via, of the way, is at the very beginning of the Commedia and throughout. I mean, the Commedia is this way, and we are clarifying, we're rectifying, and there are two aspects of the way. There's a circle and there's a straight line. The circle is the divine, the straight is the human, properly understood, and the two are somehow integrated, and so we have the so-called spirals, right? But how do the two play out together? That's the question. And e condoleami alla giusta vendetta, the just vengeance. The just vengeance. And here just is also giusta via, you could say, because this, if the way is, what does the translator give you for the way?
Path, the encumbered path.
Uncumbered, yeah.
Encumbered.
Encumbered, yes. Yeah, there are obstacles, okay? And here we have the just vengeance. So the original way is the right way, which is not encumbered, the straight way, huh?
Mhm.
Which is what he is trying to recover.
Yes, it's one that's lost in the first.
Okay, right. This is just, these are just some indications as to just a signal where the key terms are, and then one has to work through the whole. And why is he saying this? Why is he saying that? And you could be working on this. Now, very often, Dante is beginning a canto with reference to an earlier one, because everything is interlocked. So whenever we study Dante, but any other poet really, but especially Dante perhaps, where everything is locked into a chain. If you have a doubt about the meaning of a certain passage, help yourself by going to the previous situation where there's a key term that is repeated, not by accident.
I
So
have done that sometimes.
see
It's
how that, in what situation that first term appears, and now that'll help you understand the sense of the next the reappearance of that term. Okay, what is your question about this first section?
um, the natural thirst,
Yeah.
which belongs to the poet, such, um, uh, is identified in the essay as justice, which is fair enough in my uninitiated reading, because he talks about righteous vengeance uh, within that same situation where he's thirsty. So it's reasonable to assume that that's connected to his thirst somehow. I wouldn't be able to explain it, but the suggestion makes sense at any rate. But it is this desire is not satisfied except by the water, for whose grace the little Sumerian woman besought, and what that water in the Gospels is really referring to is an open question, of course.
Okay,
Um,
notice this. Um, you see, he was going behind my duca. Duca
mhm.
is leader.
Yep.
His leader, as in the duce, the dukes, the one who conducts and who leads, the duce. And so he's going behind him. In other words, he's following the poet Virgil.
Yep.
And the natural thirst is quenched, so satisfied by water that
Mhm.
the little girl, who obviously feminita, she doesn't know much. She's a kid. So the kid is seeking grace, or rather, she's seeking the water that satisfy her from the clouds, from the heavens. But that water that's satisfied need not come from the heavens. And indeed, he is not a feminetta, although he's pretending to be almost a kid sometimes, Dante in his poem, his avatar. Yeah. But he's following the duca. He's following the poet who will help us understand the nature of that which comes by grace. It is not enough for Dante to be, and for us, the readers of Dante, because that's the whole point, for us to be like this feminetta, like this little girl.
Yes, and that leads to Statius' introduction of the two ways, um,
Okay,
about the storing of the soul and all of this. This is something I don't understand.
go ahead.
Uh, uh, First, however, we're going back to the poem and going to, let's see, 57 to 60.
Even after Scondoleami alla giusta vendetta. Why is he speaking about the right vengeance? It's not the vendetta. It's like this is sort of a vindication.
Yeah.
So he is vindicating something. He is vindicating poetry as by taking a step back from this childish, even femminetta. He's not being a chauvinist. He's simply saying this little girl who had a very superficial and childish even understanding of grace, and he's saying, well, I'm vindicating something about it, and especially poetry, as helping us understand that which comes by grace, that which we receive
Yes, I
gift,
see.
as a gift.
Because
Okay?
he says he has the same thirst, but that doesn't take him to a well. It puts him on an encumbered path by Virgil.
Right, because you see, okay, I have the same thirst, you could say, but
Yeah.
I find myself in trouble today.
Yeah.
Because that you see that grace as understood by the Feminita has not solved our problems. Not that he's out there to solve the problems, but it doesn't really help us live with the problems. It seemed to have promised us to have solved the problems. It did not. And at the same time, that promise distracted us from the real challenge of living with the problems. And not accidentally does he immediately say, after this vindication, what does the translator speak about vindication?
He says vengeance.
Yeah, does not really give you the why in the world would he vengeance? What does this have to do with a Samaritan woman? Vengeance. What?
No, people read Italian and they think vendetta. Ah, vendetta.
Yes, exactly. Vendetta. But what's the point of that? Why? Where is he going with this vengeance? Who has to be, where is this revenge? What's it for revenge for? Who's the enemy? And why is it right? So is Dante saying that vendetta is good? That vengeance is just? Just vengeance. Ah, fierce Dante. Why not wait for law to come in? But it's vindication. And immediately he says, ed ecco. And then he says, Cristo in the next line. Hello?
Hello. Ah, you want me to
Ecco.
read? And lo.
No. I mean, do we see? Ecco, Cristo. What is the line? Ecce homo, right? Here is the man in the Bible we read.
Ed ecco, sì, come scrive Luca.
Right. Sì, come ne scrive Luca, just as Luke writes, che Cristo apparve, that Christ appeared a due che erano in via, to two people who were on the way. Now, I'm just referring to this, ed ecco Cristo, ecce homo. Here is the man, says the Bible, when it's, here, what do they say in English, right? There's here is the man, the apparition of Christ. So what we're saying here is that we have an intervention, an appearance, okay, that responds to the natural thirst of man. And it seems to quench it. It seems to solve our natural problems. But in fact, what it gives is only a promise of a solution. Because ultimately we know from Christianity itself that the solution will be fulfilled, shall we say, in the other life. And so here we can only get the promise. That's fine. Dante is not objecting to that. What he is questioning is this habit of relying on appearance and thus on the promise as if it solved our problems. It does not. It was not, that promise was not intended to solve our problems, you see. So how do we deal with our problems? Simply through the Christian promise? He says, no, because even with that promise, we have the impacciata via, the clustered way. It's, we can't move, we can't live. So what allows us to live? And he says, dietro al mio duca, going behind, following the leader, poetry. So you see now that we're vindicating a poetry that can help us live here and now, hic et nunc, even in the light of that promise. The promise alone is not enough to help us live, to allow us to keep going throughout this life of ours. You see? Hence this reference immediately to Christ. There is nothing accidental in what Dante writes. And there's nothing superficial. I mean, everything is to be understood, read carefully. And this is what we should do with all good poets. In other words, with all people who have exposed their lives to logos, to the true speech, which is the living speech, the living word, which is the one that is our own lives, our own life. The water is not just something that is given by grace and solves the problems of our life. The water is the one that of our life, the life itself. And it's a poetic life, and it's a poetic water.
Well, there will be a reference to drinking, which is of some importance in the essay as well.
Okay.
Well, 73. So said he to him, and since we enjoy as much in drinking as the thirst is great, I could not say how much it did me good. And here I do have to get back to the essay. So the appearance of Statius pleases Dante from within. I'll quote your essay here. The distinction between human and divine providence had first been stressed in Inferno 7. Illuminating is a comparison of that canto's verse 96 and Purgatorio 21, 73 to 75, which is where I directed to before. In the former locus, providence takes pleasure in itself in the heavens. In the latter, Dante is compared to he who takes pleasure in himself in Sigode, suggesting that Statius, pleases Dante from within, or that Statius is an image of Dante's own free will, or rather a shadow through which Dante's persona, and indeed Dante's own reader, may advance toward his good. Whereas divine providence or fortuna finds pleasure in itself and through itself, Dante's intervention across purgatory signals pleasure through transposition in another.
Yes. Yes.
This is what my question is about.
Yes. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Or I once told someone I agreed with myself.
You read with yourself.
I agree.
Oh, you agree with yourself. Oh yes, that's right. The shaking his own hand, so to speak. Well, sometimes there's no one else available to to have a good agreement with. Then in the essay, you tell me you refer us to Canto. Let me see, Canto 4 of Purgatory. You suggest here that with regard to transposition in another, that this is further demonstrated in stanza 1 to 11 of Canto 4 of Purgatory.
Okay.
As well as others.
Let us pause a little bit, however.
Yeah. Perhaps this is getting a little bit too bogged.
Well, Well, we could go through a close reading of this, but let me point out that in 70, and this is related to the essays formulation, the article. Well, in 69 we have the free will, that is libera volontà, and in 70 però sentisti il tremoto e li pii spiriti per lo monte render lode, a quel Signor che tosto su li invii. So there is, here we begin having this, we could even speak about an ambiguity, when we have the reference to the quel Señor, that Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what happened? There was somebody coming along, and there's an earthquake, and everybody's excited. Ooh, salvation, salvation. Turns out it was only Dante. Only? So there is this double edge to this Signor.
Yeah.
So we have, is it these feminette who are waiting, you know, and they see the appearance and they say, ah, the Lord from the clouds? Or turns out what is shaking the earth and what is lifting the lid, ultimately we see with Statius, what is lifting the lid is Dante's poetry. Wake up, right? Wake up to the nature of grace. Dante's poetry. That's what is really earth-shaking. Okay? And the two, you know, he's not replacing divine providence. He is, as I think the passage in the article suggests, that he's not. But the two are complementary, somehow complementary. Divine and human providence. Okay?
Okay.
Complementary, and we leave it at that because, you know, how the two, you know, how we are to understand the interplay between the two is the great challenge. And you can ultimately, you cannot understand it without following human providence.
Yeah.
Being educated to it.
Yes, that makes sense. Actually, that does answer some of the questions I had. Often you parenthetically suggest comparing,
Different
for instance, comparing different passages. And
yeah,
and that's quite a nitty-gritty thing to do. There's a lot of going
I
back.
know. Yes, I'm perfectly aware that.
I mean, I've done that, right? And I
Okay.
had questions about it.
Okay, we can try a few the major ones, perhaps. Some readers are annoyed at that. They want to be, you know, spoon-fed everything, but that would, and then they say, well, you know, had I gone through every single passage and given an exegesis, this, you know, it would have been a book.
It's not going to be light reading, no matter what.
And I mean, okay, but these are references for those who wish to further the reading, the study of Dante, because the article is, what is it is achieving? It is an invitation to study Dante. Now, if you want to leave it at the article, that's fine. You just trust that there is a connection between these things, and I'm giving you suggestions that help you understand the issues that are exposed by Dante. If you want to study it further into details, well, go back to the original in the light of the article and, you know, do your homework.
I plan to.
That's, I mean, you as in anybody, right?
I know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know. Your reader.
Okay. So is there this passage in particular that you wish to address?
Yes. So you suggest that we compare 20 Canto 21, stanza 75
Okay.
to Canto 4, stanzas 1 to 11.
All right. So Yahim, you point out that in the article there is a relating of Purgatorio 21, 74, 5, something like that, 3 to 75, to Canto 4, the beginning of Canto 4, the first verses of Canto 4. And you wonder what the connection is?
Yes, and particularly 6, because there's language of kindling that comes to.
What are you reading? What are you reading in verse 6 of Canto 4?
One soul above another kindles in us.
Right. Now, yeah.
It seemeth that no other power it heeds, and against this against that error which things one soul above another kindles in us. I don't understand what psychological opinion that is referring to anyway. So that makes the matter more difficult.
This whole passage, it goes from 4 to 11, which ends up with the soul, integral soul. Altra è quella, you see altra, you see this altra of 6 is going to be mirrored by the altra of 11, if you look at the verse. Or as a matter of fact, of 10. Ch'altra potenza è quella che l'ascolta, e altra, here, and especially 11, altra è quella che ha l'anima intera. So, okay, what he's speaking about is the faculties of the soul. He says, well, the human being, in fact, is bent upon determinations, something, always some being determined, something that is finite. And so he'll listen to music, he'll look at a picture, he'll look at this, look at that, consider this, consider that. And by focusing on that, by being attentive to something, he is left with a background. So you go into the movie theater, the old movie theaters have this projector, and you don't see what is the source of this image. Now you can study this image as much as you want. You're going to be distracted from the source. And so how do you resolve that discrepancy? Okay. Can you resolve it? He said, no. There's no synthesis. So there is an integral soul, right? E altra è quella che ha l'anima intera. So questa, the one that we have in this fallen world, in this fallen life, è quasi legata, is almost tied. So think about Plato's cave, almost tied to those shadows. E quella è sciolta. The other one is untied, unfettered. It is not, think about the guy out of the cave. He's completely unfettered to he doesn't consider these shadows in the cave. Okay. Now, how can you have a synthesis of the two? Is no.
Oh, well, unless you create a new unfettered realm.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, we know about that one.
You can live in a, you can pretend. You can pretend to, but in reality you don't. And in Purgatory 21, it says, così ne disse. So it's right after this 73 comes right after this earth shaking that is the result of the coming of this Lord who is responding to these souls' yearnings. Così ne disse. Thus he spoke. Yeah, this is the way he spoke about it. E però che il si gode, and so this, he has pleasure in it. Yeah. Tanto del ber quante grande la sete, so that the thirst seems to be quenched because he is taking pleasure in the drinking as much quanto è grande la sete, as much as he is thirsty. Yeah, in other words, whenever he's thirsty, he drinks and he has pleasure in there. But he says, non saprei dir. Non saprei dir quantel mi fece prode. I wouldn't be able to say, I wouldn't know how to say, or I wouldn't be able to say, but it has to do with sapere, so knowledge. How much it gave me help, right? How much it helped me. Now, El Savio Duca and the wise leader said, right? Omai veggio la rete che qui v'impiglia. At this point, now, right? Almost now or never, but already I see the net that here vimpiglia, that traps you. And this impiglia refers to the beginning also of 21, where we spoke about impacciata via. Okay, so what blocks you is this net. E come si scalappia. So how and I also see how you can get out of there. Perché ci trema e di che congaudete. And he goes on saying, ora che fosti piacciati ch'io sappia, may it please you that I know, e perché tanti secoli giaciuti qui sei, and why you've been left there for so many centuries, nelle parole tue mi cappia. In your words, mi cappia. And this refers to the net. So you are caught in your words. So I'm just giving you little points of reference to then work through this passage, but the previous passage suggests that Cantos 4 suggests that discrepancy between, so the fundamental problem of man, the discrepancy between what we're looking at and the backstage, the background, is not solved. But here there's a suggestion that we address that problem by examining speech. And this trembling is, again, I go back to what I said earlier, is on the one hand caused by a promise, or on the other hand by poetry, which is now the education to understand the logos, to speech. And so that speech is articulating the relationship between what is before you and what is the background, what is loose. So ultimately, determination and indetermination. So poetic speech is the link between the two. And it's going to shake you. It's going to shake the ground from beneath your feet, because it is exposing the particular that you are looking at to the background, to the infinite, the finite to the infinite. And there's this notion of, he said, well, we're trapped by a net. you see, of words. And if we are helped, now it may not be that we are that we have this ultimate pleasure, and so we're satisfied once and for all. So non saprei dir. I would not know. Dire, saprei dire. So speech may not give us that knowledge in which the two poles, the finite and the infinite, are synthesized. What we have is a promise, but poetry, poetic speech, dire, will not necessarily help us solve that discrepancy between the finite and the infinite. However, it can shake us and help us live out that hiatus and free ourselves from speech as trap, as a net in which we are trapped. The speech that ties us down. And again, remember Canto 4, there's the question of tied, the soul that is tied and the one that is untied, loose. Legata, sciolta. So we would, we obviously do not want to be fettered, tied down into the cave. And yet we cannot be simply outside, loose. That's another soul. And that's why he says, quell'error che crede qu'un'anima sovr'altra in noi s'accenda. There is an error that believes that another soul above us, above ours, is lighting up. So you have two souls, the one that is here and the one that is there. These are not two different souls. So in other words, in order to escape from our predicament, we are not to abandon, let's say, abandon the body to go for the soul. That sort of talk. In other words, some agnostic attitude, let us say.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not that there's another one that awakens outside or beyond this one. So, the challenge for the poet is not to solve the problem, but is to help you live with the problem. That's another way of putting it.
Okay. And the mountain that the pious souls are on, they're seeking that outside soul.
They're seeking liberation from their problems.
Yes.
There's somebody who's going to come. They're waiting for somebody to come along and solve their problems for them.
They're in that net also.
Well, they're not free from it because they are like the feminetta, who childishly waits for somebody to solve its problems, and that's
yes.
You reader, that's the wrong path. You're going to be caught in a net and be in a mess.
Well, Statius in the poem is also caught for reasons that I don't quite understand.
But he's playing.
Of course, he's playing.
They're playing a comedy. Dante,
I get that.
Statius and Virgil, father and mother. They're playing as parents with Dante, and Dante, of course, is the author of the Commedia. So he's playing the part too. It's you think of it as a trio, in opera. You have the three who sing together, and you have a duet, but you also have this three people singing together, and it's a play. It's a comedy.
Yeah, well, I started getting that suspicion by the time that Statius starts speaking to Virgil. Not quite here yet. Um, so let's try to help me help me see it here too. Statius talks about these earthquakes. He talks about how he himself wants to be free. He talks about the soaring of the soul. Um, that's in 58
Of Canto.
of Canto 21. It
Okay.
trembles here whenever any soul feels itself pure, so that it soars or moves to mount aloft, and such a cry attends it. Um, and then
Pure, yes, I mean, monda, che alcuna anima monda sentesi, that she feels mondare. Mondare, you know, is like the world. World is that part of nature that is civilized. Mondare, to clean, to it's not wild, right? So tremaci quando alcuna anima monda sentesi, sì che surga e o che si muova per salir su. That it moves itself to rise, right? Okay, so there's trembling, go ahead. Forse, by the way, in 55, you see trema forse più, forse, fortuita, by almost by fortune, it shakes, trembles, già poco od assai, ma per vento che in terra si nasconda, non so come, quassù non tremò mai, but I don't know why, quassù, above, here above, it never shook. Okay. But go ahead, because the exegesis that are careful take time. So
yeah.
tell me what in particular, what shook you?
What shook me? What goes on of purity alone, of purity the will alone gives proof, which being wholly free to change its convent, takes by surprise the soul and helps it fly. First it wills well, but the desire permits not, which divine justice with the selfsame will there was to sin upon the torment sets. Those last three stanzas I don't understand.
Is this in the article?
Is it an article? Yes, you do talk about you do talk about that. I think we have to go back a little bit for that.
Because I mean, we can
Yes.
go through the exegesis of various passages, but what
Yes.
what I think is of primary importance here is to clarify questions that arise in the course of the reading of the article. So if there's a
Yes.
passage in the article, say, well, what are you talking about? What are we referring to here?
Yeah.
What's the point? Let's try to address that first. And
Oh, yeah. I'll go that way from now
hmm.
on. So to come back to what we were talking
But
about
by the
before.
way, if you see mondare while you're at it, if you look at monda in 58, I don't know if the translation that you have gives this out, but then in 61, della mondizia sol voler fa prova, che tutto libero e a mutar convento. So, mondizia refers to monda in 58, right? The cleanliness. What does it give you in the translation at 61?
61 of purity, the
Oh,
will
so he
alone.
gives you again purity. So pure
Yeah.
and
It
purity,
says
right?
purity.
At least it echoes the two. That's good.
Yeah.
But purity is okay. Understanding that uh, there is a sense that refers to mundus, right? The world. And so you could say civil life as opposed to what is left in the wilderness. Okay, so purity may be misleading. Okay, all right. So as far as the article is concerned,
Yes. Well, we go back a little to what we were discussing before. Though our natural thirst for justice is said to be satisfied by grace alone,
mm,
hope for knowledge of the signs of justice suffices to begin moderating the pilgrim's thirst. The signs in question amount to a trembling or shaking of the divine order, occasioned
hold
by
on,
the
hold on, hold on. Do you
yeah
understand? Knowledge of the signs
yeah
moderates. So as you are understanding these signs, the signs are the signs of grace. In
yeah
other words, the words of Christianity, you are moderating, yeah, your passions, and you say, well, okay, I'm not solving any problem, but I am improving myself by listening, by understanding, by heeding the biblical message. Okay, go ahead, please.
The signs in question amount to a trembling, hence the tremors or shaking of the divine order, occasioned by, and this is what I don't understand, the human will freely aiding the soul to ascend toward the good or proper object of
Say
desire.
it again. The human will.
Yeah, freely aiding the soul to ascend towards the good or proper object of desire. Uh, and or so explains Statius, further indicating that the soul in question either surges, simply surga, or moves itself to rise above, si muova per salir su, thanks to the intervention of a free will.
Yes, yes.
Um,
That's Dante's, the poet.
yes,
So
yes,
this is what the poet helps you achieve.
and that refers back to the beginning of the canto where Dante talks about his quest, the road he's on.
All right.
Is that right?
Um, in reference to the Samaritan.
Yes, and then to Dante himself. My question is, does that mean that Dante's quest is somehow helping Statius rise? Is it helping
Yeah,
him?
but it's vindicating Statius.
Yeah,
It's vindicating Statius's own poetry.
yeah.
So it's helping us also understand what Statius was really up to.
Which is a different mode of ascent than the people on the mountain are engaged
They're
in.
not even ascending. They're waiting for somebody to save them.
Yeah, they're waiting for the green light, shall we say?
Yeah, well, the providential state to come in.
Yeah. Whereas Statius talks about, well, in this translation at least, the purity of the will and these things, and somehow
Let
Dante's,
me put it this way.
yeah,
In the modern world, very often we have this dichotomy. We speak about, and I've addressed this issue and probably will have to address it again or keep addressing it. We have this dichotomy between the individual and the collective.
mm-hmm.
So you say, well, there's a collective that is ultimately represented by the state, the providential state. So the providential, so how should we live? Are we supposed to be free as individuals, or are we determined by our society? So let's say, well, you're born in such and such situation, in such and such a milieu, environment, and that environment determines what and who you are and your choices, so-called choices, which are really determined choices. So they're not real choices. So now, where's the way out? Or otherwise put, what is the seat of freedom? Who is choosing? Is it the state that is choosing for you? Your environment is the source of action, or is it the so-called individual who is choosing on his own? And here we have these fellows. There's no we're in the pre-modern world. There's no uh, madness, modern madness, or uh, belief even that the individual can choose and he can help himself out to salvation. That's nonsense, because these guys are obviously aware that they can't reach the heavens on their own. They need help. So they're just waiting for that help. The only thing is that it's not a secular state. It's God himself who is supposed to intervene through Christ. Okay, that makes some sense. It's living. It's not a system, a mechanical system, that a machine that is to intervene and lift you up like an elevator.
Factory.
You know, that you cannot have a living relationship with that kind of, savior. The machine is not listening, is just waiting for the subway to pass by and pick you up. That's all. It's just there because it's mechanically structured that way. So on the other hand, you have, so this is the communitarian, let's say, the moral, the one who, the person who's saying, well, there's a moral determinism here. Okay, we are, whatever our actions are, they're determined by the system, and so we're waiting for the system to intervene and save us. And so the other extreme today would be given by those who say, well, we are individuals and we make our own choices and we can't wait for the state to intervene. That's great that we can't wait for the state to intervene. We don't, but the only other question is, well, it's so easy for you to pretend to be your little God and deciding everything on your own in a bubble on your own, to be self-made man, when you have the resources for that.
Yeah.
Many don't have the resources for that. So what do you say about the child who is growing up in the slums? And what do you say about the child who's growing up in Auschwitz? I mean, it's easy for you to say, well, it's his choice. He's an individual. He can do it. Well, there's people who have a hard time coming out of their traumas. It's very difficult for them to come out. And ultimately, let us look at the Christian message. You can't do it on your own. You need the grace of God, right? I mean, this is the Christian method. You can't do anything on your own. So this new, even libertarian, but individualism that we have today is a pile of crap. It established, individual, let us be clear, is a Latin term for atom, social atom. Atom is a Greek word for individual. It's just the same thing. Atom is that which cannot be divided. Individual is that which cannot be divided. It's just Latin and Greek. And what does it mean? It means that you're a social atom. But it presupposes a materialist reading of political life. In other words, political life is based on something that is apolitical, namely the individual. And this individual is the foundational brick, the Lego brick, upon which you build a whole society. But on a Platonic reading, let's say, of politics, there is no such thing as the individual who comes into the society and to build it. Little brick, all of our bricks contractual, they all come in from. No, the self is constituted socially or politically. This is the problem of indebtedness. Gratitude. We're born in gratitude and trust. We don't learn trust. We're born in trust. So where does this bring us? Well, if the seat of choice is not the individual and it's not the machine, the communitarian collective machine, then what is the true seat of freedom? Where is freedom? If it's not in the big machine, and indeed in the small machine, because really the individual is a kind of machine. but you know, it's a kind of a little brick that is there and says, I am determining myself, I choose.
And that problem takes us back to Canto 4 as well.
The question of solving the two, you say the background, you could say that because you could look at, okay, well, I'm determining myself in one way, and then there's a background. And I could be pretending to be my own self and solving everything, and I am myself. I am an autonomous individual. But that is something you do by forgetting the background. So you haven't solved any problem. You're just pretending. You're not grateful to the the sources of that self. You're just
Yeah.
not aware of it. You become you're pretending to be a little god, self-sufficient. That's nonsense. You're never
Yes, that
self-sufficient. You're never self-sufficient. I don't know anything to anyone. Maybe later I can say, I can pretend to be grateful. Oh, I'm grateful for what this society has done for me. But you don't understand that the constitution of the so-called self is reliant upon something beyond the self.
I thank my society for helping me plot against it.
Or build myself even further
Yeah.
and earn millions of dollars. I don't know. I mean, build a castle,
Whatever.
or establish
Yeah.
this great, myself as a wonderful human being, and blah blah blah. So, no, gratitude comes from the point of constitution of the self. There's
Yes.
no individual, first of all, because you could say, well, let's play with, you're just playing semantics. No, the individual by definition is the social atom. Just call him social atom then. Am I a social atom?
I know of a way to divide atom. I'm talking about atom.
Yeah, okay, yes. Yes, but the atom, right? You
Yes.
understand this. I just recently was speaking to some guy who was telling, oh, but the Greece, and then we found out that you can actually divide the atom. I said, no, listen, Mike, you don't know the ABC of this. This is not the point. They stole the term because they thought they had discovered what the ancients had merely contemplated.
Yeah.
Because the atom, as you understand, being by definition what cannot be divided, is not in space. The moderns believe or claim to have discovered what the ancient empirically, what the ancients had merely contemplated. This is the modern scientific revolution. And then all of a sudden, this explodes in their face. And they say, oh, but actually we find out through our experience, because we are empirical, that, as if the ancients had never had experiences. We discover that actually the atom is divisible. Ooh. You morons, that's not the atom that they were talking about. You're just playing with dreams, with shadows, the shadow of the atom. Okay, and sort of a nominal reification or imitation. And so now you find out, lo and behold, everything empirical is divisible. No kidding. What a surprise. And now you end up in a fractal world in which we have the neutrinos and the little things floating around, and everything is divisible. Okay, so much for the atom. The social atom is divisible as well. And what do you know? While in Psychology 101, everybody's talking about, in Sociology 101, they're talking about me, the individual. It turns out the individual is divisible
Into a reptile, a cortex, a couple other thingamabobs.
Yeah, and endocrinal impulses, neuro impulses, biochemical mechanisms, all of these mechanisms that are at work. Mechanisms. This is the key to the modern world. Everything is based on machines. Mechanisms, mechanical. Look at this guy. What's his name? The everybody. Jordan Peterson, the mechanisms, the 12, 13, 14 steps, and then the 16 and the 14 leaps. and the 15, 17.
Well, I'm still on step 6, so let's not get too far ahead.
I'm
But
still
look,
on step 1.
okay. Statius is not dealing with this problem. He's not in this context where.
Well, we have these two. Okay, so what's the alternative? Where is the seat of freedom if it's not in this mechanical universe? And the seat of freedom is, we don't have to speak about a self, but the point is, if we do speak about a self, what is the self? And it turns out to be the logos. Logos is the seat of freedom. Logos is a living word, but the living word is a poetic word in which you are exposing yourself to the fundamental problems, and in that exposure, you are coming to life. The problems are giving you life. Facing the problems, you are born. And when you are born, you are not born as a piece of meat. You're born as Logos itself, which is what he calls poetry, the living word, the water that flows. Quali fioretti dal notturno gelo, chinati e chiusi. These fioretti, the little flowers, are the verses of poetry.
We're going to the fir tree now. That's good. We could go there. I had a question first.
Okay.
About the problem that Statius is dealing with, which I don't know quite. I understand he's submerged, right?
Yes, he's sort of frozen. He's kept in a, imagine, however, the dough. You're making a pizza, right? You're kneading the dough. You leave it there to sit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, right? Then you pull it out of the oven, you lift up and what do you find? Treasure. That's what's happening.
That's right. Well, so he has that problem of being frozen. He gives us a description of how, I guess, people stay down there, don't get up where they want to be. He says first, this is stanza 64. First it wills well, he says, but the desire permits not, which divine justice with the self-same will there was to sin upon the torment sets. And I have been lying in this pain 500 years or more, but just now felt a free volition for a better seat. Okay, so Dante's coming in, but before Dante comes in, what's the problem? It wills well, but the desire permits not, which divine justice with the self-same will there was to sin upon the torment sets. What does that mean? What's he talking about?
What these verse 64?
Yes.
What do I say in the article? Do I address this?
Statius himself is supposed to have sensed the presence of a free will on a better, stronger footing, whereupon the pious spirits of the Mount of Purgation rendered praise. But you talk about the two modes of ascent, but you don't talk about really what he's about the how does he put it? Longfellow, which divine justice with the self-same will there was to sin upon the torment sets. I don't really get the pickle that Statius is in on this mountain from the article. I mean, you talk later about obviously the issue of this baptism thing, but I don't get the situation on the mountain that Statius is stuck in. There's something. I mean, they talk about it, right? Statius is supposed to be avaricious / prodigious. You go into that at great length, but first I want to get a picture of what's going on this mountain, why he's stuck there.
Yeah.
What's happening to him?
Well, why he's stuck, that should be clear in the article. We can look at these verses, but he is stuck because of, shall we say, the effect or the byproduct of the Christian promise.
Yeah.
And who is he? Who is Statius? He represents poetry,
Yeah.
classical poetry. And let's see, we'd have to go through the various, I don't know if we should do this now, this whole notion, this whole problem of trembling, the earth shaking, and the cleaning, de la mondizia sol voler. But you see in 61, voler fa prova, voler, it wants, this willing, che tutto libero a mutar convento, l'alma sorprende. So this freedom, again, tutto libero, e di voler le giova. Again, the willing. Prima vol, look at all this willing. Prima vol ben, before it wants well, or the good. Ma non lascia il talento che divina giustizia contra voglia, divine justice against this voglia. I have this, well, I want to do something, yeah? Come fu al peccar, pone al tormento. So that you could say, and I'm not going to, we could go through a translation, but this requires time and care. The point is that with a certain reading of Christianity, Statius's poetry is illegitimate. It's a kind of sin. And the divine justice as conceived there is against the poetic desire and the poetic life. So on a certain reading of Christianity, Dante's poetry is illegitimate, and but he is not exposing himself now. He is just exposing the ancients, and he says, well, you know what? I'm going to save you. I'm going to vindicate that poetry and show that it's not against divine justice at all.
Yes, because so my imagination of this thing was that Statius wants to fly, or surge, he wants to soar, but he's expected to be like the pious spirits, and so they're telling me, you get down there, don't cut in line, something like that. Is that the problem that you're describing, that it's not viewed as a legitimate mode of ascent?
Yeah.
Well, yes. Formally, Statius is supposed to help Dante, but of course, Dante is writing this book, so Dante is playing the pet. He's playing the Giovinetta. He's playing as this poor little kid who is passing by. Please help me, poets from classical antiquity. And it turns out he's helping bring them back to life in his own person. It's not about me, it's about the Logos. I am to the extent that I am Logos. Oh, I am to the extent that the Logos lives in me. I, as a physical body, am just an image of the Logos that is living and speaking in me. This is the living water, the living word. It is alive. It is it is the life of the body. The body's dead. The life of the body is the Logos. It's not coming from the sky. Samaritan woman. Remember, I have this. Did I have an article? In the article, I have this discussion on the Samaritan woman. She's waiting for the water coming from outside, or even from the heavens. He says, no, it's right there. You have it already. What do you mean I have it? Yes. And it's manifest as me. So I'm saying, give me. Because I'm at the core, the heart of your own being. pull it out. Socratic, right? Platonic, pull it out. I am manifesting what is hidden in you. Right? Now, it's not part of the psychological makeup of the individual. No. It is not within me in the modern sense. It's private. So I'm going to read a self-help book that gives me the 16 steps to find out what's hidden inside of me. It's also hidden to me. What is hidden to me would seem to be God up in the sky. I can't reach it. He's behind the clouds. That's hidden to me. What is hidden within me is what I seek in my feelings, right? In my own cogitations. But the quest here is to understand what is inherently hidden, what is hidden in the well, but is manifest outside of the well as in human discourse, in poetry. The well of the Samaritan woman I'm referring to. Okay? So, who is our true husband? You know, the woman's true husband, the feminetta. Right? And so she had husbands. There was a whole question of the husbands in the parable, as you know. So this is what is at stake. Yeah?
Yes, this is the parable. You're talking about the parable that the what I call the Sadducees pose, or what?
The treatment of the parable, you mean? In my article in Vogelin?
Oh no, we're talking about something else. I think different things. I mean,
Well, if you notice that, maybe I'll have a little link. There's at some point in an article I have the article was supposed to be accompanied by that image that I have, that little watercolor that I made for my kids with the Jesus at the well.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Okay, so that's in that sketch I have the proper postures. It's and the water that goes through her and to him. It manifests the dynamics, the original dynamics of the story. But you know, it's picked up here, and it's no accident that there's at the beginning of this 21, there's this feminetta that asks for water that comes from grace. Yes, it's grace, but what kind of grace? How are we to understand this? Mi travagliava e pungeami la fretta. It was in a hurry. Per l'impacciata via. I was in a hurry because the path was filled with obstacles. It was blocked to some extent, and I'm in a hurry, and but we have to see if we have to hurry up. There can be different reasons to be in a hurry. Maybe because we only have a very small window of opportunity, and to hurry up and hop, shake and leave, and let's vindicate now that it's possible. Dante has this very small window of opportunity, the dream, in which he can vindicate something huge. He's going to be gone. Dante, the man. So let us, our life like a cloud, let us take advantage of that cloud. Let us give ourselves in response to this calling, right? The calling of the Logos that involves our surrendering ourselves as bodies as masks. What are we masking? Are we masking mechanisms? Are we masking biochemical, bundles of forces? Are we masking? What is it that we're masking fundamentally? What is the prime mover for the human being? What is it that makes us alive? And the answer here is the living logos. And he's vindicating that. He's vindicating the prime mover. And who's speaking? Who is speaking? The logos. Hence the apparent ambiguity that you'll find throughout the comedy. Is he speaking about the poet, Dante, or is he speaking about Christ? Apollo sometimes? Apollo, is it Apollo, or is he speaking about, who is this?
Talks about a griffin eventually, which is a cryptid, a composed beast.
All kinds of personae. But they're personae of this living word. And it's alive here, speaking with him. And then, that alone justifies the posthumous designation of the comedy as divine. It was a designation that was in part attributed to justify the comedy vis-a-vis the authorities. Other passages?
Well, one more thing about this.
Okay.
So Dante comes to Statius, an earthquake occurs. Dante hears the account of Statius, of his problem, of what happened just then. And yet at the end of it, Dante does not know how, what good it did. As much in drinking as the thirst is great, I could not say, since we enjoy as much in drinking as the thirst is great, I couldn't say how much it did me good.
How much? The quantity. In other words, does it help solve a problem?
Yeah.
Through quantification. In other words, I can't measure the distance between the dissatisfaction and satisfaction, shall we say. I can't solve the problem of dissatisfaction.
So he doesn't obviously in the literal sense of the story, they don't warp up the mountain there and then. They still have.
Notice how it picks it up again in 79. Ora chi fosti, piacciati ch'io sappia. May it please you that I know. Non saprei dir, 75. It refers to 75. I would not know, saprei, sapere, right? To know, dir, say, how much it gave me help. Perché tanti secoli, how many, though so many, quantity, centuries laid, right, there, you've been placed there, seated there, lying there. Well, it goes on. This can be explored further, but if you if you want to move to other questions, we can. They're all related, obviously.
Yes, sure. How much time do you reckon we got?
Let's see. We can tackle a few more questions, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll just look at the essay next. All right, so with all of that, the essay summarizes, we are thus faced with two modes of ascent. The first is by grace and is readily recognized by pious Christian spirits. The second is one engaged in by Virgil's student, Dante's pilgrim, and arguably recognized by the statues who appear seemingly providentially in response to Dante's natural thirst for justice. Likewise, we are invited to discern two senses of the term Señor, the Lord, who is the regal sign of the active presence of a free will. Whereas in the natural world, the Lord is the Christian God. In the pre-Christian political world, the Lord is a man who in turn may be an authoritative persona, or the author of personae, that is, poet as true king.
Yeah.
We went into that a little bit, but what I don't understand quite so well is the term, the regal sign of the active presence of a free will.
Okay. Do I give a quote for or a verse reference to the regal sign?
Yes, that's 22 to 24, but I don't know what's.
In what canto? In what canto? Same canto?
It must be 21 because you don't give the canto, so it must be the same.
It's the one that I had referred to or in the previous references. So it would be 21, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
Verses 22, 24?
Yeah, let's see what's there.
Dottor mio, se tu riguardi a segni, if you heed the signs che questi porta, that this one carries, e che l'angel profila, and that the angel shows, let's say, ben vedrai, you will see well, che coi buon convien che regni, that it is appropriate that he reigns with the good. Okay?
And that's how he's introduced to Statius.
So notice regni and segni.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fairly obvious, I suppose.
Okay, yeah, should be. I don't know if you get it in the translations, but the signs are regal.
Yes, marks. It says here about fair enough. Signs, marks. Yeah.
So the signs are the signs of the one who rules. Now, go to 82 and you say, in the time of the good Titus, with the help of the supreme Rege, king, vindicò, vindicated again.
It says here avenged.
Yeah. Okay. But you can see both, but the point is vindication. The outside shell is vengeance, but his point is obviously vindication. Now, see, he is supposed to have, Titus is supposed to have, with the divine help, right, destroyed the city of Jerusalem. And that was to take revenge on, it was to punish, essentially, the blood sold by Judah, who had betrayed Christ. Right? Now, it just so happens that nel tempo che il buon Tito is echoing a verse from Inferno 1.
Yeah.
Nel tempo degli dei falsi e malvagi.
Yeah. Subulio.
Subulio, you remember?
Mhm.
Now, it just so happens that Subulio, under under Julius Caesar, everything was fine except for the fact that it was under the false gods. In other
Yes.
words, it's false to say that everything was fine.
Although Augustus was good.
Yeah,
Said, said to be good.
Yes, but you know, without look, right? Well, nacqui su Giulia, ancor che fosse tardi, and you know, this is another issue. Even though it was late, e visse a Roma sotto il buon Augusto, right? So he goes again, the good Augustus, just as here nel tempo del buon Tito, right? But there he had said nel tempo degli dei falsi e bugiardi. So they were lying. They were false and lying. And if the gods were false and lying, what do you think about the good Augustus?
Yeah, right.
Who was this new god? He was false and lying. Hello?
All of them were. He's speaking in the plural.
He was good, yes, in the time of the false gods. And well, hell, if that was a time of false and lying gods, what does that tell us about the good Augustus?
And then later the preachers under Domitian, it carries on.
Yeah, well, you know, and this is to understand this line where he said nel tempo che il buon Tito. That was the time of the false and lying gods, which tells us something about how good this Titus was, who was helped by the supreme king to revenge the what is it, the wounds, the holes, right? The wounds, whence the blood sold by Judah came out. Col nome che più dura e più onora ch'io di là, io di là. So, with a name that più dura e più onora, that lasts hard, though. Dura has this double sense of endure, which is dure, hardened, and more honors. It's hearkening to, you know, the earlier, again, to the famoso, the Inferno one, famoso assai, ma non con fede ancora. I was very famous, you know, I was quite famous, but not with faith, not yet with the faith. In other words, I hadn't been Christianized yet. So he was speaking in a time of lies, of liars, and of falsity, where it is good, of vengeance. And I'm going for the outer sense. Vengeance was good, and it was fine to to slaughter people, to as an act of vengeance, for having, because what had happened, the blood had been sold. Now we know the story, you know, it's, in other words, Christ dies, Judah has betrayed him for money. And now who is this supreme king? What do I say in the article? I speak about the signs, right? Can you
Yeah.
can you read that again, please?
The 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 regal sign of the active presence of a free will.
The regal sign of.
The active presence of a
Can,
free will.
can you give me the whole sentence?
Yes. Likewise, we are invited to discern two senses in the term Señor, the Lord, who is the regal sign of the active presence of a free will.
Yes. Okay. So we have the great Lord who justifies murder and slaughtering, and so vengeance, and um, and then so that's the, let us say, the misconstrual of the biblical message, and then you have the other sense, which is the mind of the poet, the mind, and we go back to these segni. Se riguardi ai segni che questa porta e con l'angelo profila, ben vedrai, well, good, you'll see, che coi buon, with the good, convien che regni. It is appropriate for him to rule, to be a king, with the good. So you could say that the poets are the signs, or provide the signs of the mind that is, in Inferno 1, there's a reference to la mente che non erra, the mind that does not err, that does not lose itself in these dreams. So outside of the dream, there is a mind, and the poet is a sign of that mind. However, with the buon, and it rules, it is king among the good. But with the bad, with evil people, for evil people, let's say, there is the supreme king is supporting their lust for blood, we could say. And so in this fallen world, we have, we could say, two different lords. We have, in practical terms, we have the Lord that is used by evil people to justify their evil. And then there is the mind of which, that is ruler among the good, of which the poets are signs, or they're providing signs.
I see. In the essay, you put it as follows. Whereas it continues, in the natural world, Lord is the Christian God. In the pre-Christian political world, Lord is a man who in turn may be an authoritative persona, or the author of personae, that is, a poet as true king.
Yeah. The only thing is that with Christianity, we have the promise of that God.
Yeah.
Among the sinners, the bad people. And as long as it remains a promise, it's fine. But try to establish it, as with Titus, as justification of our own doings, and you end up with a horror story. Okay? So the Christian God is fine as long as he remains a promise, but let that promise be converted into something concrete, right? And you end up with the slaughtering of Jews, which is what is being done here with Titus. A complete misconstrual, so Christianity in co-opted, the Christian message co-opted to eliminate a Judaic root, you might say. Using the Jews in this case as a scapegoat to establish the dominion of evil people.
Oh boy.
And it's all under the pretense of, we're all good. Of course, he says, yes, we're all good, except for the fact that we live in an age of false and lying gods. Ouch. So your goodness is false and you're a liar. Ouch. And that's when I was writing, by the way, he says. Before I was before the age of faith. Uh-oh. Who cares about that age that is bygone? Unless that same problem reemerges today. Unless that problem is still with us. Ouch. Ancora. Still, he says. Ma non con fede ancora. Not yet, but ancora can also mean anche ora, even now. Tanto fu dolce mio vocale spirto, che Tolosano a sé mi trasse Roma, dove mertai le tempie ornar di mirto. So sweet. Dolce is the word for dolce stil novo. Dolce sweet is the verse of poetry. It was so sweet. Mio vocale spirito, my spoken spirit, my vocal spirit, my voice, my living voice was so sweet that even though I was Tolosano, a se mi trasse, Rome drew me to it. Again, he's anticipating, referring to his being baptized. Rome, the ancient Rome, and the new Rome too, drew me to it. Just as Rome in ancient time drew him to him, the new one baptizes him. He puts him underwater and keeps the lid over his head. And it can be even worse, because there was no real lid over his head in the age of the false and lying gods. There will be a lid over his head in the Christian age, where the Christian God is used to do even worse. Ouch. Used by evil people to do worse to poetry than was done earlier. Ouch. Tanto fu dolce, so much, tanto, quanto, quantity. He seemed to, what does this sweetness do? Seems to solve the problems. Why was he brought to Rome? To sustain the false God, to sustain the falsely good Titus. That's why he was brought to Rome. So much, so sweet. Again, the reference to solving the problem. To confirm that Titus was good, in spite of the fact that he was a liar, that he was false. So, assai mi trasse, Rome brought me to itself, where in Rome I was given I meritai, I deserved le tempi ornar di mirto. So I was crowned as a poet of empire. And holy moly, in the new Rome, what do you think is going to happen? They're becoming the prophets of the new God, who, as promise, is fine, but in the concrete, he is used by evil people to do evil. And that ain't good for him.
But people still call him Statius.
What?
But people at least still call him Statius.
Was that supposed to be a consolation?
Well, it's just it I noticed that he directly after the wonderful treatment he has in Rome,
Ah,
he says
yes,
that, well, and people still, it's almost xenophobic. And today people still call me Statius.
yes, yes. Bravo, bravo. And you see that ancora that is in 87 that reappears in 91. Ancora. Still, he's rubbing it in. Just in case you had missed the first ancora, he's taking you back to it by saying, and still, people call me Statius.
And where's the first ancora?
87.
87.
At the end of 87.
Oh, I scrolled over it. Oh yeah, ancora, yeah.
La fede ancora. Faith. He
Yeah.
adds. Faith. Which normally you would read still or not yet, because he says non con fede ancora. I did not have the faith yet. But yet this ancora comes up in 91. Statio la gente ancor di là mi noma. In the new Rome. The old Rome and the new Rome. Ouch. Now you say, well, why didn't Dante just say it straightforward? Ha, ha, ha. Imagine Shakespeare telling his audience, you bunch of creeps. Only 1 out of 1,000,000 of you will understand what I'm talking about. But that's not the point of his, imagine how quickly his plays would be burnt.
He did not yet live under the good Joseph.
So, but that's not the point. The point of his poetry is not to enlighten everyone as Kant did, because what does Kant do? He says, I'm going to enlighten everybody. That's bullshit. He is faking it. He too is not going, he's pretending. He knows that most people will not. There'll just be plumbers who are working to establish the brave new world that in which Kant will be the king, and Kantians will be the king, but not the plumbers. The little petty plumbers, so-called scientists.
Oops.
They don't need to know, but he can pretend that he's enlightening them. And he can pretend that we're moving into the direction of this universal society of enlightened people.
Where he could say that.
Well, yeah, where he could
Pretty
say
much.
it. Yeah, but him. But I mean, everybody's just, what does that enlightenment means, bottom line? It's just follow the rules.
No, of course, which is why now he could say it.
Yes, but he, I mean, you come to the point, you mean now today?
Yeah.
Well, you could come to the point where you say, at this point, and at the terminal stage of that society, it doesn't matter what you say. You can expose everything. We're under the empire of the machine. So everything is machine. So it doesn't matter.
Which is why we write like we write. And that's not unrelated actually to this speech of Statius where he talks about himself, because you end up talking in the essay about that Statius has to scream something under Domitiano that he's no longer allowed to say under the church. And right now, of course, we are also screaming. We are, I mean, not that we're prodigious, in a way we are. I mean, we have to say the same things over and over and over and over. And, we listen to each other, at least. So, under Rome, Statius was also apparently in a position where he wasn't really getting it across.
Well, he was, but his function was to moderate the passions.
Yeah.
The new, in the medieval Christian times, they the ancient poets are serving primarily two functions. Well, first of all, they're prophets of the kingdom to come, Christendom, not even of the kingdom to come later, just prophets of Christianity's, the new age of Christendom. First of all. Secondly, they teach us a bit of grammar, how to speak. And thirdly, and this is under the table, we can cultivate their reading. We can, the students can pick them up and have a ball. They can look at the comedies, Terentius and others, and they can, laugh their head off and see all kinds of things. So, but the primary two purposes of Roman poetry and writing in general was right there. One, prophetizing, natural reason shows that man is naturally inclined to receive the Christian revelation, number one. And so we need the pagans to confirm that, to help us, help the regular guys, regular people. See, you're naturally inclined to reach this point, especially the intellectuals. You see, reason, your upbringing, it all flows into this. Number two, help you how to speak and write well. And they had a hard time doing that, but they learned. También que mal, more or less. And then underneath, they actually read this. And they had a lot of debates. A lot of the debates in the Middle Ages is absolutely not monolithic as a period. There was a lot of controversy, a lot of debate, which has to do with the way they were reading and reading these ancients. And my goodness, they were not stupid. Thomas Aquinas was no fool literalist. He understood that there are levels of reading, and he didn't mean it just in a formal, idiotic way. He meant that, you can read between the lines, and you're not supposed to say certain things. So it's very tricky how you speak in an academic world. It's very, very tricky.
Well, you can say fides querens intellectum. I mean, that is the other side of the integration of these poets, is that you can talk about reason in this way.
Well, the goal is to figure things out and to expose yourself to truth. They're not hiding it. These are formulas that they come up with. The formulas should not distract us from the fact that they were involved in thinking things through and exposing themselves to thought.
Yes.
Exposing their lives to thought. This was, they were very close to the ancients, closer to the ancients than the moderns who pretend to return to the ancients will be, the Machiavellian.
By a mile. Yeah.
They had an awareness, a reverencia, this reverence and disciplina that and a keen awareness of the difficulties, the problems of life. Keen awareness of this problem of authority. No matter what happened in the Christian world, they're still tackling, they're still struggling, they're still wrestling with the angels. The moderns just use the ancients as fuel to build a brave new world.
So it's almost like what happened to Cicero's on divine things.
De rerum de natura deorum.
Yes, that's right. There's a whole section on providence. I read through some translation of it very briefly, and I thought, like, okay. And you told me before that this was often redacted.
Today, what we have blanks. He was about to speak to you about divine providence, and all of a sudden, sack, the page was cut.
Yeah.
They took the page out.
Yeah.
It's just I'm about to hear the story about divine providence, and it's out. Why? Because he's saying things that the guy who was writing said, "Oh my goodness, how is this possible?" That he's
Yeah,
saying
they heard it from the wrong guy.
they heard it from the wrong guy, and they hear it in a strange way. On top of that, it's not just the ordinary way of saying it.
Yeah.
So another point in the Dante's Statius and Virgil is that what he's suggesting in Virgil in particular, Dante, yeah, is that Virgil is saying, is speaking of things that happen all the time. And these things that happen all the time, or the things that he's speaking of as happening all the time, Christianity speaks of as having happened once.
Yeah. The age of Saturn, the Saturn returns, what is it? The age returns the age of Saturn's rule. Was that it? The fourth eclogue?
Yes. So it looks, Christianity on a superficial reading seems to tell you, hey, there's one coming out of nowhere, and that's it. It's paradigmatic. This is the paradigm. It gives you the paradigm. But it turns out that if you read Virgil, these things happen cyclically. In other words, that's his way of saying this happens all the time, or it's what we're talking about pertains to the fiber of everyday life.
Which, in a way, you could lead to speak about it in terms of paradigm, in the sense that there's a sustaining order that is presupposed by such repetitions, and I mean, you could look at that.
Yes, but
but it's not talked about in that way.
Look at Christianity. Christianity tells us that there's a living Christ, right?
Yeah.
That every time, what does the gospel say? Every time two or three of you meet in my name,
Yes.
my name, the name, that I am there, I am alive with you. So,
and then of course there's the body, which is the bread, and but it's also the church itself, constituted in a, it's all of these different things.
Samaritan woman, where is this living water? It's hidden.
Yeah.
Now, here's the relation between the hidden and the visible.
Yeah.
Okay. Virgil carrying the lamp. Remember the image? He's carrying behind him. People are looking at the lamp. He's looking before him to the original light. So the poet sees, you're looking at the poet's words. The poet is looking at the living ones.
Yes. Well, Statius in Canto 21 is looking at Virgil. And Dante wants to say something about that. I don't know what. He stops short. I wonder what he might have said.
Well, is there a passage in particular here? Well, maybe we can tackle another point, another passage in particular.
I'm tempted to go to 22, but perhaps we should save that for another time.
Okay. If there's something else for 21.
I have one thing, but I have to. Yes. Well, let's talk about the nod. Okay. The nod of Virgil to Statius. Dante's smile in the essay you also talk about as a sign. Virgil's nod as a sign, and Statius goes into what is it? sometimes false matter gives rise to. I don't remember the exact. I think that's 22 as well, isn't it? Or no? Yeah, that's 22. And we're already in 22 there.
Notice that in again 21, you referred to his following Virgil, and
Yeah.
The Aeneas, what is the word in English? What do they say? Call it Aeneas. The Aeneas is in the feminine. Aeneida, as if it were a woman.
Yes, because it suckles him. Yeah.
Because Eneida, I say, la qual mamma fummi. She was like my mother. She was like my mother. And so here it starts with the suggestion that we have this Statius being the father, Virgil being the mother to Dante, the parents. But already, he's introducing this by saying, the what is it? What is that? It's always confused the when I go shift in my mind from language to language. Aeneads, the Aeneads is presented as Aeneid as a woman's name. So, do we have something else from 21?
Without this, I weighed not a drachma's weight. I picked up on this because it is it's related to currency in a way, and Statius is repenting in this part of Purgatory for as we find out in 22 also for avarice, but the sin here together with the verdure of its opposite lies, and so it comes out in the essay that in fact Statius was prodigious. Also in 22 he talks about the hands spread wide, he sees them and he repents upon the side of that.
Notice the link to the selling of the blood in Judas. That was in we said in 84, and so in 99 senza essa non fermai peso di dramma. So without, it is through poetry, right, that poetry makes the difference, shall we say.
Yes. Yet if he did not have a drachma to spend, he would have been poor, and so he would have, in a way, would have been no better off than he is now, repenting for prodigality.
Well,
suppose you could be poor and a spendthrift. That stands to reason, I suppose, in a way.
Yes, but there's two different senses. Non fermai peso di dramma, of the drachma, which is probably about 3 grams. And of course, Dante likes the 3, but fermai in the sense of I did not write anything. Yeah, I mean, this is what he is suggesting. I didn't write anything without being nourished by you.
Yeah, if you take the unit away, I weigh nothing. Yeah.
Right. So all of almost fermai peso placed, produced, essentially is produced, placed the weight. Yeah. So I didn't put down on paper, okay, the anything. Now this drama, the let's say the money, yeah, relates to this. Where did this blood come from? There's the holes, right? The holes, the wounds. Whence came out the blood that was sold by Judas. And the blood, you could say, that is converted into money. The blood is alive, the money's dead.
Yeah.
And so there has been a betrayal. We have converted what is alive into what is dead. This is idolatry, of course. And in Statius, what seems dead is alive because it's animated by and nourished by the mother. Right?
The dead thing being the drama.
The drama is the dead word, the letter that kills, but it's alive.
Yes.
However, it can be appropriated as something dead. It can be sold in exchange for what is dead. The living word can be traded in a Faustian way for what is dead.
Yeah.
But his word was nourished, it was alive. So sure, you can rape him, but you're not going to rape his soul because he's alive. You can take his word nominally, and again, remember when he says, famoso assai, he says, Statius la gente ancor di là mi noma. He nominates me. They nominate me. In other words, they still have my name, but the name is dead. It's buried. At least it looks dead. It's buried under the waters. The life has been eclipsed, obscured. We don't see that it's alive, that it's a living word. But I've actually been nourished. That word is nourished by Virgil. It's mama. My mama nourished me. It's alive. And so bring it back to life. At the beginning of Purgatory, Dante speaks of the birth, the living. May it live now. Poetry lives. It's the living word.
And 22, I believe, or was it? Yeah, I believe it might have been 22. Statius invoked Parnassus, the caves of Parnassus, where he's fed by Virgil with through Virgil by with the milk of the muses.
Yes. And now the question will be, how do we understand this mount? Purgatory.
Yeah.
Purgatory, none other than Parnassus. Now, if you wish to tackle 22, if this was the last big thing of 21 that struck you, we can perhaps tackle it some other time. 22.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
What's left for me as major items is the verse about love of virtue.
Where is this?
Another Kindles, that's in 22.
Okay.
Fairly early in 22, and then also the fir tree.
Yes.